It's recording. So we'll just count it in. And you're right. Is someone man marking you?
No, I'm just checking because I was trying to record something on the telly there, and I'm just making sure so I can start it. But fine, fire. That's again really rude. So my apologies.
No, don't, mate. It's absolutely no problem. But aye. So 3, 2, 1. You're watching the Gog Pod. Today we've been joined by Luke Shanley. For those who are unaware of what your work is, can you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, I'm the guy that asks the boring, banal questions to managers before and after every Scottish live game on Sky Sports. Have to say, in seriousness, it's great, being the trackside reporter. I think this is my 9th season doing the trackside, so, it is good. And it gets to that stage where does familiarity breed contempt with some of the managers and whatnot now, but I think there's been enough freshening up and, players move on and managers move on that it's always something new and new people to deal with. But yeah, primarily working trackside reporter for the live games on Sky in Scotland and also working for Sky Sports News in Scotland too.
Fantastic. How did you get a foothold into the career you're in now?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I didn't go about it in the sort of normal way of, say, going to uni and getting a degree and doing all that stuff. I did go to uni, but not to do anything in terms of journalism. And in the end, I ended up working in a bank, and I absolutely hated it. I like the people I worked with, but the processes and actually, it was just before the credit crunch, and you were trying to basically sell people loans, and I really didn't feel comfortable with that. So I started volunteering for my local, what would be now Scottish Premiership club, doing some commentaries and bit of writing in terms of match reports at reserve games predominantly. So for about a year or so, I only did reserve games. Mm-hmm. And after that, I got the chance of doing the first team games and then got into local radio in Edinburgh. And then all of a sudden, things move on from there. So it was a case of, club media was just coming to the fore back in 2004-05. And I kind of got a foothold in 2005. And then it's been quite a story after that.
It certainly has. What would you say has been the most unexpected story you've had to cover?
Probably Rangers going into administration. Some people might have thought it was expected. Other people, it's like you go back to the banks. Surely the big banks can't fail, and they did. And obviously Rangers had to go through, the administration process, etc. And I was in court that day, the day that, they went into administration, and I didn't fully grasp just how big a story that was. I don't think there was many journalists inside there, but I really didn't grasp how big it was. And of course, you live through the story and you look back at it now thinking that was massive. And that wasn't just a football story, that was a big Scottish story. So that was a big one that, I had to deal with. Maybe another unexpected story, Scotland actually qualifying for a tournament. That was kind of unexpected, but probably one of the best I've been able to cover in different circumstances, of course, and difficult circumstances. But yeah, I think, the referees strike, that was one of the early ones I had at Sky, and that was interesting. Just a day of farce when referees decided they were coming over, and then I think it was the Polish Football Association said, no, we're not sending our referees, we're not crossing the picket line. And yeah, there's been a few actually, but yeah, I think... probably Rangers is the biggest, certainly, and unexpected in the sense that just the way it all developed, and moved on and on and on.
That's absolutely fair enough. So, of course, now while you work in the mainstream media, what do you think of football fan channels, say on YouTube or any other sort of platform, becoming a lot more prominent?
Well, I came through Club TV, so it would be really hypocritical and really disrespectful if I all of a sudden said that new media, I mean, I got my start in new media, maybe 10, 15, 20 years before that was hospital radio or local radio. Now you see people coming through, club channels and, I've done really well out of that. And now you see that with the media moving on or different ways of broadcasting, different ways of connecting, social media and YouTube and podcasts, that, anyone could be a journalist, anyone could be a podcaster. Doesn't mean you're good at it or bad at it, just like it doesn't mean I'm good or bad. The fact is, it's another way of connecting. And maybe people go in search of, and the only criticism we would have is people probably go and I like to take an all-round view and an all-round sort of spectrum. You're probably going to go looking for what you want to listen to rather than, does that mean you want to hear a different opinion? Does that mean you want to be challenged on your views? I don't know. But I think it's a great way for fans to connect, maybe fans of clubs that don't get the limelight enough or don't get enough coverage or attention. Maybe because you have a bespoke way of interacting. So I think it's great. I think it's absolutely brilliant that fans can find something that they want. And again, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but there's absolutely think it's fantastic because, as I said, I came through a sort of an alternative way myself. So absolutely more power to you.
Yeah, absolutely, because it sort of offers that sort of back door into potential opportunities that you would have probably got if you went the traditional way.
Yeah, yes and no. I think it depends what you want. I think I started it as a hobby, as a volunteer. I never got paid working for a club, but the more I got into it, the more I used that in the sense that it was a great experience. You got to see what happened at press conferences, the etiquette, what goes on, building contacts. And I thought it was brilliant. When I did commentaries of games, there was always two teams on the pitch, regardless of what club you were working for. For me, there was always two teams on the pitch. I always did my research on both teams because as much as it was catered for a club, I think at the end of the day, you have a duty to be fair and balanced. And that was the way I approached it. I think when you look at, you're saying a back door, some people don't want it as a backdoor. They like what they are because they know they have a niche following. It's very bespoke to be a certain club or a certain theme. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I guess you can use it as a vehicle too, and you see a lot more people from that sort of background at media conferences now, and people build up confidence, asking questions, getting to know how it works, getting to see that the mainstream media aren't all these bad people that were made out to be as well. I'm only joking.
Of course. Because I basically started my YouTube channel, basically me reacting to Motherwell, whatever was happening with us, and then I've sort of tried to branch out, and I'm trying to cover like the whole Scottish football as just a massive blanket over it because since I couldn't do matchday vlogs anymore because of the virus, we started doing watch-alongs for basically any televised Scottish football matches, and of course watch-alongs for my own team because I thought, well, if Gillette Soccer Saturday can do it, why can't we? So I just thought, why not just go ham? And we've certainly gained a lot of subscribers from it. I'm now 800 away from 10,000 subscribers.
I think the thing is that, you're trying to find something that's different in the market, which is great, but doing something you believe in and you're passionate in, be it your club or now broader in the spectrum. I still buy a season ticket for the club that I support, and I'm maybe fortunate to be able to do that and afford it. Also, I'm a massive Scotland fan, absolutely massive. And I have, I've got my membership of the Scotland Supporters Club, fully paid up member. So when anyone chucks that one at me about freebies and whatnot, and yeah, you do get into games for free, although I am at my work. But, I'm a massive Scotland fan. And if I'm not working at a Scotland game, I'll be there as a fan. So I wouldn't do it if I didn't passionately believe in it. So that's the thing, live and breathe Scottish football. And it's great to hear. And it's great that there's so many other avenues now as well.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is your favourite ground that you've worked at?
I don't know about in terms of favourite, because you could say what's maybe the best stadium, and you've probably got more of a fan hat on in that respect, or in terms of facilities, etc. I mean, I've been lucky enough to cover a game at the New Camp, for example, but it was like the players were just dots. I was away up the back. In terms of grounds, being able to go away with Scotland, you do get to go to some big stadiums and big grounds. But I always look at the ones back home. I always think Tynecastle is absolutely brilliant for atmosphere when it's full, and Hearts are in the top league, or when they're playing big teams, like Rangers and Hibs when they were in the second tier. Celtic Park and Ibrox, when they're full, the noise is unbelievable. And Hampden gets a lot of stick, and sometimes rightly so, for the atmosphere. But when it's full and it's a massive, massive game like Scotland-England, which I was lucky to cover, then it is great. And I got to cover a lot of cup finals there as well. So when it's full, and when the atmosphere, maybe it's in spite of it rather than because of it at Hampden, but just because it is our national stadium, there is something about it for me that I do enjoy to a point. But yeah, I think as I say, I've been lucky enough to go abroad and watch Scotland in different stadiums. So it's a difficult one to answer. It's probably a bit of a cop out, but as much as I wish Hampden's atmosphere would be a lot better and you were maybe a bit closer to the pitch, there's still just something about it on a big international that for me is the place to be.
Of course, and I would say for me, Hampden's up there as well. Even though a lot of people say, it's this, it's that, but for me, it's the sort of the fact that I don't get to go to Hampden often. Like, as a Motherwell fan myself, I mean, we had that season where we went to Hampden 5 times to see Motherwell play, because of course 2 finals, and we actually played Queen's Park in the opening game of the season. So, and I'd actually said at the time, this will be the first of 5 times Motherwell will make it to Hampden this season.
I think that's it. When you go to Hampden, and it's going to be. I'm covering St Johnstone Hibs at the weekend, so I don't know when you're putting this out, so I don't want to date it. But yeah, covering that, I covered Hibs against Hearts, and it was really, really weird. Being from Edinburgh as well and going to so many Edinburgh derbies, that was probably one. It's in Glasgow, which is weird enough, but 2, just with no fans, it is really difficult. But I think in the Tartan Art, we've been, in the Scotland Supporters Club and been at the France game, the Italy game. That Italy game, I've never known a build-up like it. The excitement, the tension, the drama, and then you think the noise that day. It was incredible. And the England game was just unbelievable in terms of atmosphere, certainly at the end. So, on its day, it does have its highlights. Unfortunately, it's difficult when it's not full, in some of the games, even when it's a big game, if it's not full, it is tough.
I'm pretty sure I do remember one of the stories you covered in the build up to that game against Italy that we lost 2-1 as well. I mean, I think it might have been someone sitting in a classroom on a table, and they said, "Can Scotland qualify?" And got the whole class to go, "Yes!" in a massive row. I don't know if it was you or it might have been someone else, but
it might have been my illustrious colleague Charles Patterson. It might have been him. I don't think it was me. I was just before my time at Sky, so it might have been him.
That's fair enough. We'll move on to the next question now. If there was a rule in football that you could change, what would it be?
Probably obstruction. I get really annoyed with just players just being really, running into the corner and being negative, and then just feeling a touch and going down, So there's maybe something in around that just frustrates the life out of me. Players feel a touch now and go down and think that merits a foul. Mm-hmm. For me, that's not an infringement, feeling a touch and going down. But, my colleague Andy Walker always says if there's contact, go down and see what you can get. So that's up for debate. But for me, it's not for me. So that's in and around that sort of, area of rules. That's one that I would like sorted out.
Yeah, it's certainly frustrating for me because, I hate it when the beautiful game is not being played and teams that sit back and are happy on a 1-0. I mean, my team, Motherwell, in the last 2 games have been 1-0 up, and we've surrendered our leads and then drawn the game 1 each, both times. Arguably to 2 wrong decisions, but the fact that, I'm a big advocate of attacking football, and I wish that it was utilised a lot more in our game.
it's weird because, you know, if Scotland go and sit in against a big world power and get a win or a draw, then you take it. So it's probably a hypocrite football fan, me, in that respect. But, you know, it just sometimes it annoys you. It probably annoys you more when it's going against you, I'll have to be honest. But
100%. But if there's no way that your opponent's scoring, then I'm more than happy with it.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. But, I mean, it's just something that I just think I would like to see refs being a bit stronger on it, that's all.
Yeah, 100%. What is your favourite item of memorabilia you've picked up over your career? Now, this could be a bit of advice or just any memento.
Well, anyone that knows me knows that I hoard memorabilia. Every game I go to, it's programs, it's tickets, it's team sheets, it's anything. I am so bad. And if you look at my spare room, it's like a museum. So I am bad that way. But on the flip side, I'm really lucky because sometimes you're in at stadiums and, you know, I get really OCD about team sheets that are wrong. And, you know, there's times that I've said to press officers, you'll need to print another one off. And then, you know, you've got two versions and one's really rare. That is how sad I am. So, and I've just been, just before the pandemic kind of hit off nearly a year ago, I've been sort of buying program binders now because I've got all my programs into seasons. I'm giving you a window of how sad my life is in that respect. So it's, I collect anything and everything, mainly club or Scotland specific, but any game I go to, and it's a nightmare just now because there's no programs and there's very rarely team sheets or tickets. But yeah, I'm a massive hoarder. There's a few different bits and pieces. You know, I think when I covered the Scottish Cup final in 2013, it was Celtic against Hibs, and William Hill, the sponsors at the time, they had made up banners for both Celtic and Hibs Cup winners. So I was able there was a spare one, and, you know, I was able to get that. You know, the guy said, take that. So you have a Celtic winners and a Hibs winners one, but Hibs didn't win it, you know, so that was rare. And things like, you know, that I was lucky enough that, you know, knowing one of the sponsors of the leagues one year when a team won a championship, you know, there was a spare medal, and they said, listen, they're spare. They're not the proper medals that and this is, you know, shedding light on, you know, an open secret is that you get the medals from the SPFL. They're the genuine ones, and then the sponsors have their own ones, you know. So I managed to get my hands on a sponsor's one, you know, and I was really quite pleased with that because it was my team that won the league. So that was good. So yeah, just things like that, you know, being lucky, being in the position I am to collect and hoard. But yeah, I am really, really bad. And I'm bad at listing things as well, like things that I need. So, and I get quite OCD. I have to get this because it's on my list to get. So, but it's getting to the stage now where I've got to a point where anything that I want now is going to cost me a lot of money. So, lot overtime now, you know. So,
yeah, I mean, I used to collect programs as well until I got not enough space because, like, I've got boxes. Like, even when because my uncle was the Motherwell team doctor at the time, so my uncle would every Motherwell home game, like, he'd send me a program. And it was great. Even if I didn't go to the game, I still had a program for it.
I just when I started going to games, my uncle used to take me, and he would just buy a program and give it to me. And when I took it home, I just didn't get rid of them. So by the time I'd gone for like the first season that I really enjoyed football, you know, and I was a mascot at a game, actually against Motherwell. Would you believe? I've got a photo with Chris McCart in the house. So that, you know, that I just collected these programs, and then the next season it was, well, just keep the next ones, and then it just kind of went from there, and then it became a bit of an obsession. So yeah, I don't get out much at night. Let's be honest. I live quite a sheltered life.
Well, funny you should say that. Is when I was mascot for Motherwell, it was against Hibs. It was a 3-2 game at the start of the season in 2011, when we'd played Odense in the Europa League on the Thursday night, and we'd scored in the last minute to take home, like, it was a 2-1 deficit, but it was still an away goal, and we still had the hope of going through.
Yeah, I think I was at that game. I think Craig Brown was going fighting with the Odense manager or something like that, or squaring up to him, and there was something.
Oh yeah, because in the home game at Far Park, we got beat 1-0, but Odense had 2 men sent off.
Yeah, it was quite a fiery game. Yeah, I think I was at that one. I think it was that one. I mean, the one with Motherwell for me, and this is why it's always really important. You'll like this.
Yeah.
You might remember a game at Airdrie against Flamurtari. So
I was not at the game, but I have much to remember about that because I was on holiday on the Isle of Lismore, and we were watching the game via teletext. So as first time we checked it, Jamie Murphy had scored twice. It was 2-0. I was like, nah, surely we're on drugs or something like that. And next time I checked, it was 5-0. I was like, nah, this is definitely not working. And then when Flamurtari pulled them back to make it like 6-1 or something like that, I was like, right, that's more like it. But I couldn't believe we'd won the game 8-1.
Well, that was my very first game for Sky. I was doing the updates that night, and they're thinking, right, we'll give you a kind of, Sky had just got the rights to the SPL, as it was called then. We'll give you a shot, on you go, see what you can do. You've done radio before, quite inexperienced, but we'll give you a shot. And I was on the telly 9 times and for goals, and it probably helped me, to be fair. I should, go next time I see Jamie Murphy, buy him a pint if you're allowed to even do that just now. But yeah, absolutely. That game, so that Motherwell one lives with me, because that got me the gig, although Jim Gannon wouldn't speak to us after the game because we fixed his satellite dish. So that was my introduction. And it's funny because in later, when I was covering Scotland right at the start of the road to Hampden, you could say, playing Albania away in the Nations League. And Rudy Vata was very kindly, and he lives in Lanarkshire. He was over covering the game, and he picked my cameraman and I up in Tirana, the capital, and took us to Skoda, his hometown, where the game was being played, and chauffeured us up there. And he was talking about that game, saying, I better watch what I say here, but just saying, that was interesting. That scoreline, given that they had won, I think the first leg 2-1. So. Was it 1-0? Sorry, my apologies. I knew they were ahead, so I should remember that. But he was he had questioned some of the things that happened in that game, and selfishly, I kind of said, "Well, it gave me a career, so I'll take it. I will definitely take it." But that was my first game at Sky. That Motherwell game, very first game I did.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is about the first leg over in Vlore. I think that's where it is. Apparently, it was the same referee that was the referee in the Scotland-Lithuania game that gave Lithuania that penalty that was a complete dive.
Mikalunas, yeah.
Yes. We lost the game 1-0. John Sutton scored a penalty, which was wrongly ruled out, and it had to be retaken, and he missed the retake.
Yeah, I remember Alan Burrows saying that the heat that day as well, and they had that right road trip to get back to the airport. And the conditions weren't great, but they certainly made up for it in the second leg. But yeah, it was goals. I think even Paul Slane might have scored as well. So, but that was my first game at Sky. So I always remember, I actually found the programme, again, back to programmes. I found that I was clearing out I've got this kind of storage area in Edinburgh, and I had to I was clearing some of it out, and I found the programme, and I actually brought it back to the house. There it is. That's the first game. So that started it all. So that one always lives fondly with me.
Well, I'm pretty sure you'll be interested in this. My uncle brought back the equivalent to what would be a programme in Albania, and it was just a wee pamphlet about the game, and obviously it was in Albanian, and it had a wee Scottish translation for welcome to the Motherwell team, etc. And like the Albanian spelling for Motherwell was just the usual spelling, but without an extra E. So in between the H and the R, there's no E. It's just Motherwell.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, maybe they had picked the wrong school in Scotland to get them to translate it. You never know. But but those ones, when you go on these European away games or Scotland international away games, it's always the away programmes that are the tough ones to get. So in between doing all my build-up, I'm probably annoying press officers or UEFA delegates to ask if there's team sheets, programmes, just or whatever version. Yeah. Just let me, when Scotland play Slovakia, or it's Slovenia actually. Whenever Scotland plays Slovenia, there's always 3 different versions of the programmes for whatever reason. And in Belgium, they have 2 different versions because 2 different languages, bilingual country. Yeah. So they have Flemish and they have French, and it's it's always you're trying to get you're trying to find it. And I've actually got a job to do. I've actually got a manager standing there while I'm trying to source programs. So again, a window into my world, yeah. And you'll realise that you're lucky that you don't obsess over such things, you know, and being a hoarder.
I sure used to, but now I just collect match tickets. I've actually got a wee collage on my wall around a mirror that has the Motherwell club crest and my name under it. So I've got several like cup finals, Scotland matches, and other weird games. Like I've been to Wimbledon. I've been to some really strange wee grounds in England as well.
Football or tennis?
The football. Yeah, I have met the mascot that is a Womble, so there's that.
You do know that everyone's switched off because we're so sad talking about programs, but you know, I could probably spend all night. So that's the you've got me started. That's the problem.
Well, we're doing this for the two people that actually care about collecting programs as well.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough.
So who would you say is your favourite person that you've interviewed?
You know what? Weirdly, not a footballer. It was Tom Watson, who was the Ryder Cup captain at Gleneagles. And a year before the tournament, they were doing some promotion, the European Tour, and the US guys were doing the preview. We got on a steam train at Edinburgh Waverley and got the steam train all the way up to Gleneagles. So we interviewed Paul McGinley, really nice guy, works with us at Sky, great, and he was fantastic. But Tom Watson really had the charm offensive on to win the PR battle, and Paul McGinley was great, but Tom Watson sat down there and he just oozed class. And I remember being so gutted for him. I don't know why it really bothered me, but when he didn't win the Open, you know, in his late 50s at Turnberry, and you know, you felt for him because that would have been a great sporting story. And then a few years later, I'm sitting with him on a steam train, which is weird enough because you rarely see them now. And we're just chatting away. And you know, I'm not a massive golfer. I like watching the big tournaments, but you know, for example, my colleague Charles is a good golfer and a big golf fan. I like it enough from a distance, and I can't play to save myself. But you're sitting there, and this guy has won so many Opens and things, other major tournaments in golf, and he was just brilliant. He was really, really good. And afterwards, the next channel weren't ready to interview him, so he just sat and was chatting away about courses that were passing. We're going through central Scotland, and just, as I say, oozed class. And the thing is, you speak to somebody like that who is, you know, one of the best golfers in the history of the game, you know, along with many others, but, you know, he's won all these majors and nothing was a problem for him. Whereas you get some footballers that probably couldn't lace the boots, club legends, and they don't want to engage, or they see the media as a chore. This guy, as I say, top class, and it was a pleasure. It really is. And that's something I have on one of my social media accounts, you know, I have a photo of that, just Tom Watson and I on the steam train and going up to Gleneagles. It was different. It was different for me because I predominantly cover football. So, you know, I like football, you know, football's, you know, my passion as well, but, you know, I like boxing and things like that. But golf, you know, from a distance I like, and just Tom Watson was great. Just a legend, you know, proper legend.
For me, there's no better buzz than knowing that you're in a good interview as well. Like when you're sitting down speaking to someone and you share the same passion, and it's great when the conversation's flowing. It's better than just sitting talking to a brick wall all the time.
I mean, when, for example, you know, and I'm going back a while now, but when Scotland played England at Wembley for the first time in what would have been 14 years, it was 2013. You know, I picked up the phone and I managed to get a number for Bobby Brown, who's former Scotland goalkeeper, last surviving Rangers treble winner, the very first team to win a treble in Scotland. And he was a Scotland manager in 1967 when Scotland beat world champions England. And I thought, this is an interest, you know, I want to find this guy, you know, and speak to him. And he was in Helensburgh, 91 years old. And you don't know what you're going to get, you know, just obviously he's at an advanced age. And I turned up and it was brilliant. We ended up spending about 3 hours with him, but most of the time it was just chatting away, just talking football. And, you know, he was so lucid. Physically, he was declining slightly, but he apologised for the mess in his house because he had just come back from a week's holiday in Portugal. He said, I'm going to have to, you know, after 3 hours chatting away, said, I'm going to have to let you go now, guys, because I need to drive through to visit my sister in Falkirk. And I thought, absolutely brilliant. And what I was so proud of that I did was, and probably pat myself on the back, but when it came to the game, the qualifier in 2015, 2016, when we played them, I was able to get, 2017, sorry, at Hampden, I was able to speak to the Scottish FA and say, have you been in touch with Bobby Brown? They didn't have his number. I was able to pass it on, and he was the guest of honour at Hampden that day. And that was good. I was really glad I was able to get him there. And he was such a great guy, and he passed away last year. And it was such a shame because, you know, mentally, he was so good. He was so lucid. His stories were brilliant. And that's one of those ones where you turn up to an interview and you don't know what to expect. And I just loved talking football with him. You know, he was talking about playing in that Rangers team of the 40s and 50s with a great defence, the Iron Curtain, and the main challenger at the time with Hibs with the famous 5-forward line. And then you had latterly the teams like Hearts with the terrible trio, Motherwell with the Ansel Babes and all that. Yeah. And, you know, it was great. It was just, you know, somebody from a different era. And, you know, he managed that Scotland team that won that famous game.
That is an inspiring story. Well, for me, I'd say my favourite interviewee I've had, James McFadden, for obvious reasons. I've managed to get on the channel, and that was great. And he actually signed this memento for me. It's an artwork of him scoring that goal in Paris.
I was there that night. I still bore him when we sometimes do games together talking about that campaign.
Yeah. I would also say Scott McDonald. He came on the podcast back in the original lockdown. This was during pre-season for him because Australia's back up and running now, and he's playing for Brisbane Roar. He sat and gave me 3 hours of his time, and we just sat and chatted about everything Motherwell, which was absolutely fantastic of him. We did a 2-parter. It was that long. But moving on now, is there anything you think COVID has changed in football that may remain the same once we return to any sort of normality?
I always like the fact that with TV, you're in the tunnel, you know, you usually have a room just off the tunnel to do your interviews. I wonder if the clubs might just keep us out in the cold now, just, you know, how shall I put it, get it right up those pesky journalists. I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it's difficult, you know, but I think we will certainly think twice about before we come back. I think you'll see a kind of phased return to normality. I don't think everything, you know, once the vaccine's in and, you know, fingers crossed, everything's okay after that. I don't think it'll just be right back to normal. I think it'll be, you know, I think there'll still be a lot of caution around things. For example, for us just now, you know, we're not inside anywhere, so we do all the interviews. And, you know, this week I was at Livingston and it's January. It was a late kickoff. It was snowing. And when you see the microphone that the managers are using, just full of snow, you couldn't even see the Sky Sports branding. You're thinking, yeah, winter weather positions might be something we need to think of. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I honestly don't know because it's changing all the time, but I would just like to think that, you know, get us back inside. I'm taking a flask to every game now as well, you know, the trusty flask. So if any aspiring journalists want to know any advice, put long johns on and bring a flask when it's cold, because that's the essentials. Worry about your questions later.
Over the years, how many Scotland games have you covered that you consider glorious failures for the national team?
Well, the England game, 2-2. I was doing all the Scotland interviews that day. Jeff Shreves was doing the England interviews, and he was kind of winding me up. Not winding me up, but he kind of gave me a nudge when England went ahead. And then when Scotland scored the 2 goals, I was I think I just couldn't believe it. It was a bit delirium, really. And then when England scored again, Jeff, being the experienced reporter, just kind of nodded and thought, normal service. Although he did say, thank God, because he had to go back down south with Graham Souness and he was dreading it had Scotland won. But anyway, so that one definitely. Some of the other games I've covered, let me think. The Poland game when we drew 2-2, we really needed to win in that campaign. I felt that was glorious failure. 2-2 with Slovenia, with Gordon Strachan's last game in charge. You know, we were ahead in that game. I thought, you know, we were okay. I think Kieran Tierney was playing right back that night. Scotland wore the pink, you know, and I thought that was one that, you know, we were on such a good run that calendar year that, you know, I think we deserved a playoff place. And the irony was that with Slovenia and Scotland drawing and Slovakia not having enough points, nobody got a playoff place in that group. So Scotland had to win to get the playoff place. So that was, you know, I felt that was glorious failure. So yeah, I mean, you know, I've watched a few glorious failures as a fan as well. You know, Italy being the obvious one. You know, that was difficult. So, yeah, but definitely. I mean, the England one for me was because it was England. Probably that was the big one. You know, being ahead and you know the in injury time conceding a goal. You know, it was really gutted, to be honest.
Yeah, that England game, I was actually I had prom that night, so I missed the game. But
Old.
I know. So we had the game on one of my mates' phones during the prom, and when Scotland scored to make it 2-1, I let out a massive cheer, and then I got told off because I was making too much noise, and then I found out that England had equalised.
It was, yeah. I mean, to work at that game and to kind of, I mean, working at the game and then, you know, trying to be professional afterwards, where, you know, international football is probably the only time you can really let your guard drop a wee bit, probably like I did big time when I was in Serbia. And, you know, I thought that was going to be glorious failure as well, or it would have just been failure actually. But, you know, we did well. But the England game was the one where you were so deflated. But I think Lee Griffiths' demeanour, Gordon Strachan's demeanour, I think they summed it up. You know, it was really difficult. You know, if I was gutted as a fan, what were they like when, you know, the effort they put in? So, yeah, it was difficult, that one. And it was, you had to keep your professionalism, you know, when you just wanted to scream probably. But I think the thing was that we were, when we scored the goal, the man that does the PA, Graham Easton at Hampden Park, the two of us started jumping up and down. You know, he forgot he had to do the announcement of who scored. We're all just in, you know, sheer delirium. And again, probably a wee bit unprofessional there, letting your guard drop, jumping about, you know, but it was just one of those games, you know, you probably could get away with it, kind of.
Yeah, I think they should at least allow for a wee bit of your guard to drop if Scotland score an absolute belter with limited time left against England.
Yeah, it was I just actually took it off the other day ago. It was pinned on my Twitter that it was me celebrating when Scotland scored, when David Marshall saved the crucial penalty, and it was awkward because there was this big running track in Serbia, and I was running about.
You're running on the track.
I was on the track because that's where the interviews were, but it was a big distance between the pitch and the, you know, with this big running track. So, and I was kind of running, jumping about, but you couldn't jump with anyone. You weren't allowed to celebrate with anyone. You had to be distant. So that's why I was kind of running and jumping. But you hear me kind of screaming in the background because I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When you hear that phrase, oh, you never knew whether to laugh or cry. I genuinely didn't know whether to laugh or cry. And that's why this kind of scream came out. It was like a in-between sort of thing. And that was one with Scotland, you know, that, yeah, you were able to kind of celebrate it. I think, you know, people accepted that as long as it was all distant and safe, which it was. But, you know, that was one where, you know, you certainly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was such a momentous moment, you could say.
Yeah, so I believe before I got in touch with yourself, of course, last week I was doing interviews with Ian Crocker and Rory Hamilton, and they both nominated yourself to come on the podcast because you apparently have got a nice story to tell about your trip to Belgrade.
It was great. It was absolutely brilliant, Belgrade. Well, I mean, apart from losing my bag and I'm having a kind of ongoing dispute just now with the airline here, you know, but that's another story. Follow my Twitter for that because I keep battering them every day because I'm not happy. But yeah, it was going over there. It was just the whole experience as a big Scotland fan, going to watch games as a fan and a journalist. It was totally different, and it was really difficult as well because there was only so much you could do. But it was just, you know. Maybe it was. I think Sky had said to me, they had said, "Who are you getting from Serbia to interview?" And we went up to the training ground and we were getting Alexander Mitrovic, and he said, "Make sure you ask him about Ademola Lookman's penalty that he missed for Fulham against West Ham, I think it was." Not realising that would actually be the theme of the week in the end. Mitrovic talking or, you know, being involved with penalty misses, you know. So just from there on, it was it was great in a way, but it was sad in a way that there was no fans. But just being in the stadium, being able to see it. There was only 5 Scottish journalists over there. And as I say, that, I went down to make sure I was ready for the interviews. 1-0 up, here we go. It was a bit of a trek to get down from the stand. There's pouring rain, and they score, and you're thinking, here we go again. But when he scored the penalty, there's me running, jumping about myself. And then to be able to do the interview, Ryan Christie, I think, a lot of people's mentioned that, it was one that probably goes down in folklore, not because of me in any way, it's just Ryan Christie. And what I like about that is that, you interview a lot of footballers, and it's kind of, emotions kind of coached out of them. Football clubs don't want their players to be, put their heart on their sleeve. They want them to, and sometimes for the right reasons. I've not got a problem with that. That's just part of the job. I'm not moaning about that. But the good thing about Ryan Christie that day was he was just himself, and he just summed up how we were all feeling. And I just thought it was absolutely brilliant, So the only problem was that in my hotel room afterwards, it was a, room service. It was a party for one. So, but, I made sure I enjoyed myself, put it like that. But it was just great. The whole experience, just being there, and, just the way it worked out in the end. It was so typically Scotland, but being able to interview the players the following day at the team hotel. And again, you're having to adhere to all the distancing and make sure everything was safe. But, they hadn't had much sleep. Neither had I. I was a wee bit more sober than they were, in fairness. But, it was great. And obviously, things subsequently come out, there was the conga and all that. And, then things, I think in retrospect, we have to be careful with the virus. But, in terms of the achievement, it was so good. It was something I never thought, you just don't think you see it. You didn't think you'd see it, let alone be able to cover it. So to be there, an iconic interview, you could say now, and just that experience, it was absolutely brilliant, because I'd been in Kazakhstan when we lost, in -15 conditions, and I'd been in the Albania and the Nations League in Israel. So to see it through and to actually finally see it happen, and Rory, Rory and I used to meet him on Scotland games when he wasn't working. The two of us would, go and watch Scotland. We're big Scotland fans. So, and Crocs has got it now. Ian Crocker's moved to Scotland now. I can tell that he absolutely loves doing the Scotland games. And he wrote a book a couple of years ago. He said, he wanted to see Scotland winning, qualifying. That was one of his ambitions as a commentator. So he got to do that. So I know I was really pleased for him and Davy Provan, because they took over the commentary duties right after the 98 World Cup, and they had never commentated on us qualifying for anything. So I was actually pleased for them as well.
Did you go to the 98 World Cup?
No, I didn't. I was at Euro 96 with my dad against Holland. I went down to that game, and Scotland were brilliant that day. Probably didn't appreciate how the experience and how good Scotland played, because against a decent Dutch team. I know they had their issues at the tournament, but John Collins saving one on the line as well. VAR would never allow it nowadays. We would have been penalised for that. But brilliant, absolutely brilliant. The only game I'd been to in tournament football. Didn't go to any other games Euro 96. Didn't go to the World Cup in 98. And when my uncles wouldn't take me to the World Cup in 98, they said, this is our last chance. And I didn't really know what they meant. But then I realised that they were the age that I am now, mid-30s. I'm 36. One of them was 35. One of them was 36. And I got the impression it was our last chance to kind of be young to a point and go out and enjoy themselves. And so now I know exactly what they mean. The only problem is that I don't think we'll be able to go out anywhere when the tournament comes to Glasgow, if it comes to Glasgow. So that's a shame, but obviously bigger things at play than not being selfish. But I didn't go to the World Cup in 98, but I did go to Euro 96.
Scotland have never progressed from a group stage in a major tournament. Is 2021 the year?
Yes, for a number of reasons. I think we are now building a squad, a young squad that will be better for their experiences that are on the way up. I think some of the performances in the Nations League were good, although the results weren't always there. I think actually when we played the best, we lost the games, and when we didn't play as well, we actually got the wins. We know what it takes to beat the Czech Republic, and I know they had players out both games. So, but I think that's the first game, and I think we've beaten them at Hampden already. So yes, I think, depending on what happens in other groups, you only really need to win one game to give yourself a chance, because some third place teams get through. That's the big reason, I think. Croatia, and this is famous last words, have never managed to beat us since the breakup of Yugoslavia. Even when they were fourth in the world, we went over there and won 1-0 at the early days of Gordon Strachan. So, I think they'll be very good and it'll be difficult. That's just a kind of stat on paper. And then obviously England's a kind of derby, and I think you would underestimate us at your peril. We've got some players that played at Wembley and been successful at Wembley, so I don't think they'll be scared of Wembley. But England are, whatever we think, England are a good team and did well at the last World Cup. So yes, I do think we've got a chance. Yes, I think this is maybe one of our best chances because of the setup of the tournament. But I think it all hinges on that first game against Czech Republic. We lose it, and I think we might struggle. But I think we've got a chance. If we win it, then that might be all we need. Might not be, but it might be.
The game against Czech Republic sets the tone for me. I mean, if we beat the Czech Republic, I can see us going through in 5 points.
Yeah, I think, you could get another 2 draws, yeah. And I think it goes back to playing boring and getting a couple of results. So what? Let's do it, We've moaned about not being at a tournament for so long. Let's just get the job done. And I think Steve Clarke's now building, and I think it's good that we've got the 3 qualifiers in March to kind of give us another idea to hammer it home, and playing against good teams as well. So games you're going to have to win and games that players are going to have to turn up for. So, I think, we'll get some warm-up games in as well. Usually we are the warm-up. Now we're going to actually have to play teams to warm up, in whatever form that is, either teams that didn't qualify or maybe a team that did qualify that's not in our group. So, yeah, I'm quite excited, obviously, within the parameters of we don't know what type of tournament we're going to have because of the COVID-19 and the restrictions. But, yeah, I'm excited. It would just be Scotland's luck if we were unable to get fans into, 1, a home tournament, and 2, the first one we've qualified in for an age, So that would be a shame. But again, I know there's bigger things at play.
Yeah. So now we move on to the make or break round. This is the last couple of questions where I ask you something that's completely sort of unrelated to whatever I basically asked you before. So if you could be in a WhatsApp group chat with 3 people from Scottish football, past or present, who would it be?
Oh, good question. Yeah. Past or present, Scottish football, so doesn't necessarily have to be Scottish. Yeah. You've got me here. Let me think here. 3 different people. Dealing with guys, in the past and people I've dealt with myself, there's been some interesting characters. And not always good and not always bad, but yeah, who would I want to be in a WhatsApp group with? Oh, you've put me on the spot here. You know what? I'm going to start thinking of some guys, and I'll come back to you in a minute. There.
Okay, so I'll ask you the other questions.
Sure.
While you come up with 3. So you have to make a matchday playlist, but can only do 3 artists. Who's in it?
Well, in the old Sky Sports coverage between 98 to 2002, when they did Scottish football, I always liked a band. It was a tune called Inside by a band called Stiltskin. And that song in particular, and it was just, it was kind of iconic. You knew the Scottish football was coming on. The games would kick off at 6:05 on a Sunday night. I think if you told somebody under the age of 30 that now, they would be quite surprised. But so Stiltskin Inside, definitely, I like Oasis, and I would love, I like hearing, either Some Might Say at a game or, so Oasis would be on that playlist as well, 100%. And who would I have? So I would have Stiltskin, Oasis. I'm just trying to think here. Maybe somebody like... See, I'm probably going for more musical taste here, but because of Scotland and because of Hampden, and you'd have to be the Proclaimers. It has to be. You have to have the Proclaimers belting out 500 miles before the game. And that's just the law. It's Scotland. It is the law. So we have to do that.
They went to my old school.
All right, Fife, yeah.
Fife, yeah. Because they're from 10 minutes down the road from me, Ochtermuchty.
They are good guys, yeah. I've dealt with them before. I've had them on the telly singing "Glory, Glory to the Highbees" on Sky. Would you believe? So that was, that was one of the more bizarre things I got to hear. But you have to have the Proclaimers for a Scotland game, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And your final other question is, you're standing in the pick and mix aisle of a sweet shop. You can choose 3 sweets to put in your bag. What do you choose and why?
Well, pick and mix, 100% cola cubes.
Oh.
Definitely cola cubes. Secondary, pineapple chunks. And if I had any teeth left after that, then I'm probably thinking shrimps or something like that, or the bananas, one of the two of them, because they're similar sort of things. But
sort of fruit,
yeah. So that's it, exactly. So, but definitely cola cubes and pineapple chunks, quite old-fashioned, those sort of ones. But I used to like sports mixtures, but no, pineapple chunks or cola cubes, an absolute dentist's nightmare. So there we go. I'm just thinking of my players now who, proper legends, that to be in a WhatsApp group. I'm just trying to think, it's, I have been lucky enough to deal with some of the guys, and see, I would let my allegiances go here if I said some of the names, so I might just stick to Scotland players, but I would just, somebody that you would like to chat to. I watched that Dennis Law documentary over Christmas that came out on Sky, and Dennis Law, proper Scotland legend, everything that he achieved in the game. George Best played with Hibs, and was part of the Holy Trinity with Law and Charlton at Man United, and George, but I always think that's an interesting story, the fact that one of the best players ever in the world played for the worst team in the Scottish Premier Division as it was in 1980, and they got relegated even with Best in the team. So maybe showed you a wee bit where Hibs were at that stage and where Best was in his life. But probably Law and Best for starters, absolutely. And then thinking of, some more contemporary sort of legend, somebody I always loved sparring with in a good way was Gordon Strachan. Not everyone's cup of tea, always had me on edge doing the interviews, but one thing you always get with Gordon is something, wasn't always good. Sometimes it was a custard pie, but he was always an interesting guy. So, maybe, those sort of 3 guys involved there. But then, I like playing as a goalkeeper, and Andy Gorham, Jim Leighton were heroes of mine, but I'll probably go for definitely Law and Best, and they've been involved either playing for Scotland or in Scottish football.
I've met Gordon Strachan a couple of times. When I used to go to the Motherwell games with my dad, unfortunately, I don't really do that anymore. It was mainly me just going on my own through from Fife to the Motherwell games when I was older. Nowadays when COVID clears, but when I was going to the games with my dad, we would usually sit in my uncle's season ticket seat, and Gordon Strachan would sit behind us. So the first time I met him, he asked me what my name was. I said, "Oh, it's Gordon," funnily enough. And then the second time I met him, he asked me the same question, and his wife said, "It's the same as yours."
I always thought, it was a good spar. Sometimes when you were interviewing him, it could be difficult or awkward, but I think with Gordon, I actually got on with him in a way that, I probably got it less bad, if that's a proper phrase. And, during that great run in 2017, it was really interesting because there was last minute goals and there was real emotion, and I always felt if you were straight with Gordon, he was straight with you. And I always quite enjoyed that relationship in that respect, but it always kept me on edge. And there would be times I would walk away thinking, oh, I don't want to interview that man again. But in a good way, you end up thinking, no, I want to come back for more. And I know some of my colleagues in the broadcast media certainly would probably never want to interview or speak to him again. But I always enjoyed the challenge. Can we get anything out of him? What's he going to say? But not in a sensationalist way. Just just with the way it was going. So yeah, I always enjoyed that sort of spar. So I always think he would be interested maybe in a WhatsApp group. But definitely Law and Best, they would be absolutely brilliant.
Who'd send the best memes?
What's that?
Well,
you're asking the wrong person. You know what? I'm a technical emojis, memes, all these things. It just goes over my head. And I think I used to think, and I used to set the video as a kid for my granddad. Now I struggle to set up, my AirPods that I got for Christmas. So I need to get with the real world now. I'm really sounding like an old fogey here.
Fantastic. Right, so I've asked you several questions. Now it's your turn to ask me a question.
What is the best Motherwell game you have attended?
It would have to be when Louis Milk scored the chip against Rangers at Ibrox. No, not Ibrox, Hampden.
Hampden, I was there. Yeah. So, what would you say is the most disappointed you've been at a football match after a game? Which game?
Now that is a good question. Disappointed.
Because of the result or something that happened in the game?
Usually, I get really disappointed if Motherwell are leading the game in the first half and then they sit on a 1-0 lead and we concede. For example, a game we played against St Mirren. This was after we played Levante on the Thursday. We played them on the Sunday. Michael Higdon scored after 2 minutes. We didn't have another shot on target in the game. And then St Mirren scored last minute after Sean Hutchison got his second red card in a matter of 2 games. So I would say that I was really disappointed. But I'd say the most disappointed out of everything was when we got beat by Albion Rovers in the Scottish Cup.
Okay. Gary Phillips, Hamilton, 1-0. So yeah. I remember interviewing Gary after a couple of days after that when the draw came on. So yeah, I remember covering that quite a bit. And probably the last question I would ask is, what game would you want to attend for? What is on your bucket list in terms of what you want to see as a football fan?
Basically, I've been to see Scotland play away once. It was a San Marino game when we won 2-0.
2-0, yep.
It was a great trip apart from the game.
Yep, I'll second that.
But
the weather was good.
I mean, I've always dreamt of going to places like the Faroe Islands, so I foolishly booked up in the hope that we would be able to go to the games because I want to start going to away games for Scotland. So because I think that not only as a fan that it's a dream of mine to see football in different cultures, but also the fact that there's also a wee gap in the market. I don't really see many people do sort of away vlogs for Scotland. So I'm thinking it's in not just a way of just enjoying a trip away, but the chance of potentially being the only one that does Scotland away vlogs as well. That would be quite an interesting thing to be, and I think that would be very interesting for people that have subscribed to me to watch.
I can tell you the Faroes, when I was there, it was in Toftir, the famous old Toftir Stadium, which was kind of crumbling when I was there, and it was the fog. You couldn't see a thing, and the game finished Runavik 4, Hibs 6. So I certainly got my money's worth. I
actually had Marvin Bartley on the podcast, and he told me a few stories about their trip to the Faroes. That was certainly an interesting thing. I actually won money because when Runavik went 2-0 up after about 10 minutes, I put like a tenner on Hibs, so they were at 6-1 to win to turn the game round.
I think John McGinn scored. Lewis Stevenson put one in the top corner. So it was just, that was how unusual a game that was. Stevie Mallam was hitting them in the fog. Effie Ambrose scored at both ends. So I'm hoping when Scotland go there, it's a bit more routine in terms of a game to cover, because that was just like trying to keep up to date with everything that was going on. And you couldn't see anything because of the fog. So a nice 2-0 for Scotland would be good when we go over there. But one thing that I regret is not being able to explore the Faroes enough. So hopefully, virus depending and travel dependent, then that would be good. I'm quite enthused by the draw that we've got. I think Denmark and Austria are better teams than us as it stands, but I think we've certainly got a chance progressing, and I like Vienna, so I can't wait to go to Vienna. So no doubt the Austrian FA will play it in Graz or something.
Klagenfurt.
Hopefully Vienna. So that would be great. Aye, so yeah, it's, I mean, a lot to look forward to in that respect. So aye, well, we might see you there. We might get you on
definitely.
Sky if you're allowed to go. We'll get you on. We'll interview the fans. So yeah.
That'd be great. I think if Scotland get 5 out of 5 wins at Hampden, I think that's the main thing I think we have to look at in this group, because I think if we win our home ties, then we'll let the away ties sort of sit themselves.
Yeah, I think you've got to win the home ones, obviously, but I think you're going to Israel again, where we've played before. We haven't won, but certainly the last game we played quite well. The Faroes you would expect to win. Moldova we didn't win last time we were there. It'll be difficult, but if you're going to qualify for tournaments, and let's be honest, you have to qualify top, because I think going into a playoff system, which is another 3 games potentially, that's going to be really difficult. I think you're going to have to win the group. And the only good thing about the group is the top 4 probably seeds could all take points off each other. That might help. That might be exactly what's required. So we shall see. But exciting. I really can't wait. So especially for the Euros, everything dependent, of course. So you keep having to say that because you just don't know. These interviews can date very quickly.
Because as football fans, it's in our DNA. Sorry, to sort of fantasize about these trips, and then you're always brought back to reality and thinking, but we've got this COVID thing, and it's just brutal. Well,
hopefully we can only look up, and hopefully the vaccine comes in, and then we can all be at Hampden, and singing, Do a Deer or something like that, But hopefully all the proclaimers get them on to open the games. But yeah, fingers crossed.
Well, thank you very much, Luke. And everyone at home, thank you very much for sitting in and watching us talk about Tom Watson, programme collecting, and Scotland at the Euros. But for now, I've been Goggs89, a bit of a receiver. I'll see you later, guys. Take care.